What's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the new Soulbind abilities on 9.1 PTR. Now, over the course of the last week and a half, 2 weeks, basically since PTR actually hit, I've gotten a lot of questions here on stream, basically anywhere anybody can contact me saying, hey, what do you think about the new Soulbinds for Night Fae, for Venthyr, for Kyrian, for Necrolord? Is it going to make a big difference? Are we going to swap in Covenants? Now, we don't have Warlock-based legendaries, the Covenant ones yet. We don't have new conduits, which to be fair won't really change as they're universal, but we don't have all the information we need. But with that being said, some of these new Soulbind abilities are actually pretty strong, and they're not just Night Fae based. So if a legendary pops up that might be pretty solid for a different Covenant, you know, it's good to have this knowledge, this debate, whatever what have you, out there. Any WeakORS profiles or add-ons you see here, you can grab for free off my Twitch. If you want to swing by, hang out, ask any questions anytime, feel free to do so. Also, would like to give a huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for all the support, guys. I really truly appreciate it. Heads up, if you would like early access to the 9.1 Warlock Shadowlands spreadsheet that'll be coming out, I would assume starting this weekend, as in 7 or so days from now, basically after the next upcoming set of raid testing. There were supposed to be 2 bosses last week, but they were canceled due to instability on PTR. Once that is done, and hopefully this week's build brings new legendaries or conduits or something for Warlocks tuning, I will indeed be rolling that out. The tier 3 Felgar rank of my Patreon does indeed get early access to that if you're interested. With that being said, let's get into the video, starting off with everyone's favorite Covenant, Necrolord. So this is my Necrolord character on PTR. The actual Soulbinds aren't all open at this point. We can still see every single ability here and review them like normal. Now, every single Soulbind is going to have a potency conduit at like the next node past the 9.0/9.0.5 ones. This is the final node we have on live right now, but the first conduit you get of any Soulbind or any Covenant is going to be a potency one, followed by 2, like, for the most part, utility ones that either an endurance or finesse heading into your final, like, big, powerful ability of sorts, whatever you want to call it. Plague Divider is interesting. I'm not a huge fan of this Soulbind. It's okay, it's mediocre, it's not amazing. You have Volatile Solvent, which gives you a bit of a bonus whenever you cast Fleshcraft, but it's not crazy impressive or too OP really. Interestingly enough, when you go down here, his final ability here, Kevin's Oozling, Decimating Bolt, summons Kevin's Oozling to fight alongside you for 15 seconds. His attacks cause your enemies to take 2% additional damage from you, and he periodically grants your allies an absorb shield that absorbs 132 damage. So there's a bit of utility here. Number one, the Oozling's probably going to do damage on its own. Probably not a crazy amount, but a little bit. I'm actually curious if this is affected by Demonology in the same way the Ooze Trinket is from Plaguefall, I believe. Either way, a 2% damage increase is not bad for 15-ish seconds on essentially a 45-second cooldown because of Decimating Bolt. The fact that it shields allies is also relevant, but it's not as strong as like Nia's ability or even like Dreamweaver's passive 3% damage increase, which is basically going to be up all time on, you know, a handful of fights. The 2 utility ones here, when struck by a snare, you drop a puddle that lasts for 10 seconds. Enemies that step into it are slowed, basically, 1 minute CD. Or you have, while above 80% health, 5% of the damage taken is delayed and spread over 5 seconds. So it's okay, sort of like a mini pseudo weird shield thing here. It sort of fits this Soulbind actually pretty well. Ameni. So keep in mind, Ameni has lead by example, which causes your bolt to increase your intellect by 5%. And also buff your 4 nearby allies, or its nearest allies. Primary stat by 2%. So it's sort of a bit of rate utility as well, and you gain more for how many allies are actually around you. Her new nodes here. After standing still for 5 seconds, the next time you move, you and nearby allies gain 20% increased movement speed for 10 seconds. So not bad. Once again, movement speed I think is underestimated in rating a decent bit. It's not like it's incredibly OP, but even minor speed and chance on your cloak and things on boots in the past, they've been relevant. And I can say I've actually been saved by them a few more times, and I'd like to mention speed effects are actually relevant. When comparing it to something like this, while above 90% health, you gain a shield that absorbs 7k magic damage though for 1 minute. This effect only lasts, or basically 1 minute, it's a 1 minute CD. I feel like a good bit of the time I'd be more interested in the actual ability here that increases movement speed compared to this sort of being a niche ability. On certain fights, yeah, Resilient Stitching could be pretty good, but you're not taking a burst of magic damage every single fight. So the passive speed increase is actually not terrible. Our final ability here, Fleshcraft covers you in 3 pustules per 1 second channeled, taking damage or being healed pops a pustule, dealing 634 nature damage to nearby enemies and healing nearby allies for 1,000 damage, roughly split between them. So it's sort of like a mini AoE kind of effect that's tied to Fleshcraft, which is cool because, I mean, hey, dude, get flesh on. Fleshcraft's awesome, but I don't know how relevant this is going to be in a raid setting. This is not like a Dreamweaver ability. It's just, hey, here's 3% damage. Here's 3%, just hit a boss. That's it. Hit it, set it, and forget it. You have to cast your Fleshcraft. If you're casting Fleshcraft, unless you need to survive, you're not DPSing. So it's sort of like it's a cool ability, but I'm not incredibly excited about it. Interestingly enough, though, Bonesmith. Now, Necrolord already sims high for Destro. Technically, it sims higher than Night Fae, even though I think Night Fae is probably a little better at this point, just because of what Soul Rot does, the utility of Night Fae, Soul Shape, all of that, versus just the narrowness of Necrolord and Decimating Bolt. Bonesmith. His ability here. Damaging an enemy above 90% health grants you 152 mastery for 5 seconds. Up to 5 stacks. You cannot gain this benefit from the same target for 10 seconds. So this is a really, really weird ability. Number one, this is the only damaging DPS ability we've seen on these rows here at all. Not spoilers ahead, Night Fae doesn't have any. They're all utility. This is a damage-based ability. Now, it's still like a 5 stack of mastery that only lasts, you know, a few seconds essentially, and you can only maintain it on a mob above 90% health here. But it sort of reminds me of like Coraine with Wild Hunt Tactics or First Strike, whatever her ability is, that you can sort of juggle at times. It's really interesting if you can juggle this effect and maintain it by hitting different targets and maintaining the 5 stack. Carver's Eye can actually be really strong. Keep in mind, you're also playing Marrow Gemstone most likely, which is a pretty substantial increase to your critical strike rating, which makes Destro even more relevant potentially. Mastery, Chaos Bolt damage, everything else here, because you still have access to this. You have Mnemonic Equipment. When you damage an enemy that's below 35% health, 3% of the damage done is repeated over 5 seconds. So it's sort of like the Void Elf racial, that it deals damage and then a certain portion of it is dealt back as like a dot kind of effect. This will not affect Rapture. I can guarantee it. Don't ask. Healing an ally grants them the ability to have their damage repeat this way at 30% effectiveness for 5 seconds. Healing an ally grants them the ability to have their damage repeat this way at 30% effectiveness for 5 seconds. Limit 2. This ability is weird. It's really weird. It's not as strong. Once again, it's like a Dreamweaver kind of just flat damage increase on one target, but you also have potentially this. You have Carver's Eye, and which is a 90% buff, like 90% and above, and you have this, which is sort of like a weird execute kind of effect. They're both actually pretty interesting, and depending where things shake up, Bonesmith's actually looking like a pretty strong Soulbind. A bit of micromanagement, but Carver's Eye looks pretty decent, especially if you can maintain this stack. I mean, this is quite literally a 750 mastery buff, roughly, give or take. That's a lot of mastery. How much do I have right now? I have that's a lot of mastery, as you can see. That's a pretty good bit. 150 mastery for 5 seconds, up to 5 stacks. That's pretty strong. If you can maintain this, looks pretty good, even though it's only 90% health or above. And well, this is going to be interesting in itself. The final ability: when 3 or more enemies are nearby, your maximum health is increased by 5%. This effect lingers for 5 seconds. So if you're playing Demonology or some stamina healing, like, I don't know, I guess DPS effect here. But I'm really interested in how relevant Carver's Eye is, especially when paired with Mnemonic Equipment and just Mirror Gemstone. Necrolord's already good for Destro. I think Night Fae is a little better due to like the universal utility, the movement, everything else, but depending where things go, these two abilities could actually be pretty strong, and it's not terrible for Demo either. Necrolord doesn't look that bad. I'm a little impressed. A little bit impressed. Now, when it comes to Night Fae, this might not be what everybody really wants to hear, but the Night Fae traits that they've gained, I guess the Soulbind abilities in 9.1, are actually pretty strong. If you're a fan of Night Fae, if you like Soul Shape, then awesome. Hey, you know what? This is great news. If you're not, well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not saying Night Fae is the best Covenant at this point. No one really knows until Legendaries, everything else comes out, but they are pretty strong. So once again, everybody has their potency conduit once you get past the final row of like current traits we have in 9.0 right now. Bang, right there. Every single Soulbind has the exact same thing. Potency right into 2 options here, then either an endurance conduit or a finesse one. Once again, for the most part, I mean, your fell celerity is fine. It's relevant. Demonic momentum and I feel diabolic bloodstone are the two strong ones, which you probably at this point already have socketed somewhere in your top, like your top upper part of your Soulbind here. But nevertheless, having access to fell celerity or even, hey, kill orc's cunning, why not? A little relevant. Regardless, moving on here. So you have this called shot. When you critically strike, you gain 20% movement speed for 5 seconds. May only occur once every 10 seconds. Now, we're not this is Nia. We're not playing Kyrian here with the insane wild hunt tactics, all this stuff she has going on here. So it's just whenever you crit on your own, there's no insane crit increase here from Nia or really anything along those lines. It's fine. A passive speed bonus is okay. Not the end of the world, but it depending where you want your conduit here, it's fine. When you fall below 50% health, Survivor's Rally, you regain 20% of your health over 10 seconds and receive 5% additional healing from other spells and abilities. Now, personally, from a progression standpoint, they both seem pretty relevant. I feel like this has a bit more relevancy tied to it, but at the same time, having movement speed effects is actually pretty strong. The ICD, or I guess the CD on this being 10 seconds, is actually not that long, and the actual speed increase lasts for 5 seconds, and it's 20%, which is actually pretty substantial. So I don't think the 20% health regen over 10 seconds is going to make or break you living or surviving an ability. If it does, okay, it's once in a blue moon and chances are high you're probably gonna wipe there anyways, but regardless, they're both strong options here. The big one though lies in Bonded Hearts. Now, Bonded Hearts, Grove Invigoration, they go hand in hand. Gaining a stack of Redirected Anima. Redirected Anima is the effect you get from Grove Invigoration. It is the stacking stamina and mastery increase effect that you get 8 stacks of whenever you cast your Soul Rot. Gaining a stack of Redirected Anima from Grove Invigoration heals up to 5 nearby allies for 2% of their health. Fine, great, that's fine. If any of the affected allies are of another covenant, Redirected Anima's mastery and maximum health effects are increased by 50% for 5 seconds. First thing that comes to mind here, Demonology. Demonology stamina scaling. The mastery effect is strong too. There's that. But Demonology stamina scaling. Because once again, Demo's the only spec in the game that can scale with stamina, damage-wise. The interesting thing here is that when it comes to Demo stamina scaling with pets and things, your pet's health doesn't always update the second you pop your Grove Invigoration or your Soul Rot, get the effect. At times it's delayed 2, 3, 4 seconds, and at times it's almost instant. And the same can be said when the effect falls. Your pets don't lose that bonus health like the second your buff falls. Sometimes it stays around for 2, 3-ish seconds. But you want to be able to guarantee this effect, presumably before you cast your Tyrant. Meaning you have to have, there's going to be some way, shape, or form you're going to have to cast Soul Rot within 5 seconds of your Tyrant and have it update all of your actual pet health. Now, rotationally, you probably would just squeeze it in after your second to last hand of Gul'dan and just pray the actual stamina effect updates. So this is going to take a little bit more looking into, but a 50% increase to your stamina, so your pet stamina and the mastery effect is actually just insane. Like, once again, Demonologist stamina scaling effects are utterly insane. And Bonded Hearts with Grove Invigoration is going to be, well, quite possibly ridiculous. Dreamweaver is pretty cool. Her DPS ability is dealing damage or healing a target grants you 1% increased damage or healing to that target for 4 seconds, up to 3%. Now, I would assume this effect just refreshes whenever you hit a target. So on a Patchwork boss, this is just going to be a flat 3% damage increase, which is strong. It's substantial when you pair it with things like Field of Blossoms, also having access to just other random DPS abilities, triple potency conduits. It's not bad. The other effect here, though, is Waking Dreams. When you take damage below 80% health, you gain a shield for 30% of the damage amount, lasting 3 seconds. There doesn't appear to be any kind of internal CD on this, which is actually really interesting because looking back to actual Nia here, it indicates, hey, there's a 10-second cooldown here. There's nothing here. If that's true, this is potentially a really strong tanking ability and just a strong progression ability in general. Even if the shield's not incredibly massive, think of it as like a mini soul leech for incoming damage. It's actually pretty strong in a progression setting. It might not seem like it, but with no ICD and the shield lasting 3 seconds, it very well could save your healers a substantial amount of mana, HPS on irrelevant targets, whatever have you. It's actually pretty solid. The last ability here is Cunning Dreams. Entering soul shape slows enemies for 50% for 6 seconds. It's fine. Maybe a bit of CC, but the Dream Delver ability is solid. Once again, I think Nia is probably going to be your choice here for the most part. I mean, when it comes to demo, I mean, if you're still playing AF at this point. Destro has Kyrian though, when it comes to a lot of fights, because you have this weird Wild Hunt tactics with First Strike Cheese, and you have the new ability here, Wild Hunt Stratagem. I think Stratagem, I don't even know at this point. When you damage, or when your damage or healing is enhanced by Wild Hunt tactics, so this ability here, gain Wild Hunt whatever, I think it's Stratagem, right? For 1 minute. The next time you damage an enemy who is below 35% health, or heal an ally who is above 75% health, this thing is activated to increase your damage and healing to such targets by 5% for 10 seconds. So essentially it's a 5% damage increase for 10 seconds on targets that are below 35% health, or if you heal somebody, you're going to increase your actual healing to that target for 10 seconds. Now, there does not indeed appear to be any kind of ICD on this. It's mentioned here, or I guess CD. There might be an ICD that's not known, but it says it's active for 1 minute. So whenever that target drops below 35% health, or you heal somebody above 75% health, I assume this procs and you can stack it again, which is pretty interesting. Kyrian's a weird Soulbind because you can jump around a lot and do a lot of weird things, like with the weird, the weird sequencing that Destro has to have like an insanely high amount of first strike uptime for the incredible Chaos Bolt damage, Cataclysm damage, CDF damage. I'm personally not a huge fan of Kyrian. I think that the actual effects are a little gimmicky and stuff, but at the same time, this ability can be really strong, and it fits the overall toolkit of Kyrian well. If you can manage first strike and Wild Hunt tactics to a good amount, to a high level, this ability will give you an even bigger damage increase. Now, I will say I'm a bigger fan of Dream Delver and even bigger fan of Bonded Hearts, but the ability is not terrible. I don't actually hate it. It's okay. It's solid, and it plays well with how gimmicky Kyrian can be, which in certain settings is actually pretty strong. Night Fae looks good. All three abilities: Wild Hunt Stratagem, Dream Delver, and Bonded Hearts with Demo. If you can make this work, it's probably going to be utterly insane. So I'm still a big fan of Night Fae. And hey, let's be real here. Nia's good basically everywhere at this point. Night Fae's just too good. In Soul Shape, I can't leave it behind, man. Can't do it. So after looking at Night Fae and seeing basically no damage abilities in these rows here, we go to Kyrian, and Kyrian has a damage ability in every single slot, like on each Soulbind here. Every single one of these rows has a damage based ability in it. It's actually pretty insane. Now, let's be honest here, Pelagos is the only Soulbind we really care about, but still, it's interesting. So Pelagos, once again, DPS ability here. During combat, moving within 3 yards of a party or raid member inspires both of you, increasing mastery by 40% for 1 minute. So players may only be affected by one such effect. So it's 40 mastery. It's not a whole lot. It's a little bit. I would assume with it being a 1 minute duration, it's probably just like a permanent 40% mastery buff. It's not bad. The other effect here, after recovering from a loss of control effect, you take 15% reduced damage, and your movement speed cannot be reduced below 90% for 6 seconds. It's actually pretty relevant. I feel like when it comes to PvP in arenas and things, I'm not like, this seems more like a PvE based thing, more PvP based thing, but they both seem pretty strong in their own respective encounters and scenarios. The final ability here was actually really cool. At any moment during combat, there's a low chance your doubt will manifest for 10 seconds. Directly facing your doubt will overcome it, granting 12% intellect and stamina for 15 seconds. Hey, stamina. Demonology. Stamina's healing. It's not 50%, I guess more technically, than the Night Fae one we just talked about, but 12% intellect actually is a pretty big amount. Now, I don't know exactly how this ability looks, and if you have to maintain your focus or your fixate on this mob while fighting a boss. This ability sort of reminds me of the Harbinger's trinket from Crucible Storms. It sounds really strong, and the effect seems really good, but I just sort of feel like it's going to be too narrow in a sense at times, and too much like micromanage. At times, it's going to be like Thing from Beyond. At times, it spawns you in front of you. That's great. At times, it's behind you, or on top of you, or left or right. It's like, it seems like in a handful of fights, it's going to be too much to manage, and there's just going to be better options in certain spots. But either way, a 12% elect increase, and hey, a stamina one to boot for 15 seconds is actually pretty strong. Definitely worth keeping an eye on, depending how the final implementation of Newfound Resolve actually looks. Looking at Clea, Spear of the Archon, movement speed increased by 6% while out of combat, 3% critical strike chance for 10 seconds after damaging an enemy above 90% health. So Similar to the Necrolord one we talked about, 90% health threshold here. 3% crit is sort of something. It's not completely irrelevant. It sort of has a Valiant Strikes-esque kind of effect to it. It's not terrible. It's fine. It's okay. It's a damage-based ability in this row. Not terrible. It sort of makes me wonder if they design the Night Fade traits to just be stronger in the final slot here and not give any kind of damage-based traits beforehand, and then try and balance the other ones like this. A bit more of like throughput. It's interesting design-wise how Night Fade doesn't actually have any. Your File of Serenity reduces damage taken by 10% for 8 seconds, and its effects are also granted to your lowest health ally. That's actually pretty strong. Again, depending what you're doing, it could be really good in certain spots if this actually like affects means the bleed clear effect or not. Could be pretty strong in a raid setting. Final ability, Light the Path. Your Valiant Strikes grant 0.25% crit strike chance per stack. When your Valiant Strikes heals an ally, you gain 5% critical chance for 12 seconds. Valiant Strikes. Your critical strike grants you your stacks of Valiant Strikes up to 20. If a nearby party member drops below 50% health, you consume these stacks to heal them for 1% of their maximum health per stack. After healing this way, you may not benefit from Valiant Strikes for a minute. So, it's sort of like Kyrian buffing its first ability. It seems fine. It seems solid. 0.25 is not a crazy amount, but it's still relevant. Not as strong as Pelagos though, but the relevance is there, and I think the overall raid like, utility is sort of also there a bit with Light the Path. The final Kyrian Soulbind, Forge Light Prime Micken something, I don't know. Soul Glow Spectrometer. Damaging or healing a target, analyze this merit over 15 seconds, increasing your damage or healing to it by 1%, increasing by an additional 1% every 3 seconds. So, presuming 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 5%. Cannot start a new analysis until the previous one's been finished. So it seems like a stacking damage for 15 seconds from 1 to 5%. It's not terrible. I'm curious on what the actual proc rate on this is. I guess damage or healing a target does it, but I wonder if it happens like if it happens over and over. So can you have like, can it proc on the same target multiple times is what I'm saying, or it can't start a new analysis until the previous one is finished. But is there like an ICD on this or not? Because on a patchwork fight, this could actually be pretty strong. A 1 to 5% just damage increase that procs almost back to back to back could be pretty relevant. It sort of reminds me of what Dreamweaver's like final ability was here. We talked about Night Fae, but this is not even the final ability. This is just, you know, one like before the actual endurance slot here, which is pretty interesting. Definitely worth keeping an eye on, depending what the actual proc rate of this is outside of the analysis phase of it, I suppose. The other effect here, after taking physical or magic damage, you gain a shield that absorbs damage equal to 8% of your maximum health for 10 seconds. Each incoming damage type may trigger its effect once per 30 seconds. 8% a decent bit. It actually is. It's sort of like a Soul Leech-esque kind of effect again. It sort of reminds me of like Resounding Protection a little bit. It's physical or magic, which is solid because it's not magic, which was like the Necrolord one. Necrolord was magic or nothing. This is physical or magic, which is not bad. But once again, it's like HPS versus DPS. So depending on what encounter or what's, you know, type of, I guess, gameplay you're doing, both hold a bit of merit here. Final trait. Effuse Anima Accelerator. Scouring Tithe releases a blast to overcharge anima at your target's location, dealing 1,853 arcane damage split evenly between all targets over 8 seconds. Reduce the cooldown of Scouring Tithe by 3 seconds per affected enemy to a maximum of 15 seconds. Keep in mind, Scouring Tithe's cooldown is 40 seconds unless you get the weird, you know, recast of the actual ability. It's cool. I want to see what the actual final number is here, if it's actually 1853 or not, because technically you're limited to the actual CD reduction of hitting 5 enemies. It's 3 seconds per enemy hit, a max of 15. But hitting 5 targets for 1853 damage split evenly is what, like 350 damage, something like that. It seems pretty subpar. I mean, this shouldn't be something that's incredibly OP either, but I think it's not even as good as like Newfound Resolve. I mean, it's not, depending on what you're doing. It's just situational. It's a more AoE based versus more single target based. But if you're comparing like this to this in single targets, and technically even this to AoE in single target, it's not as strong. I mean, TLDR Pelagos I think is still the relevant Soulbind. Combat Med's still really good. Valiant Strikes is not bad, and this is going to be a scaling, like, I guess, % critical strike increase chance and a 5% one at a certain point, but I think Pelagos is the one to keep an eye on here. If for whatever reason Kyrian ends up being pretty OP, I'm really curious to see how Newfound Resolve works, because a 12% intellect and stamina increase for a whopping 15 seconds is actually really, really big. Now, I saved the second best for last because obviously Necrolord is the best. Venthyr. Venthyr is a very interesting covenant because the Soulbinds are, the abilities are cool, but they're just lacking. They're not as strong as Night Fae, they're not as strong as Necrolord, but the new Nagia, or what I call it, final ability here is actually, I think, really strong and arguably one of, if not the strongest one we've seen so far. Now, Draven is pretty much your weird, like, just not very DPS-y Soulbind here. His final ability is Battlefield Presence. Each nearby enemy trembles at your presence, increasing your damage and healing by 1%, and reducing your damage taken by 1%, up to a max of 3 enemies. So his first ability here is also sort of around like a random AoE based ability, inflicting 100% of your maximum health and physical damage split among nearby enemies. So he's very defensive based Soulbind, not one that's very competitive for DPS, and if it is used in a DPS setting, you want multiple enemies around you. Sort of weird, neither of his abilities here have DPS traits tied to them, either below half health or shadows cooldown reduced, and overhealing done to you will heal you for additional X amount. Not a big deal. The two I want to talk about here, though, Theotar the Mad Duke and Nagia. So Thrill Seeker, this is the effect that everyone was hyped about early on in beta. While in combat, you gain a stack of Thrill Seeker every 2 seconds, or 4 stacks on killing an enemy. At 40 stacks of Thrill Seeker, it's consumed to grant you Euphoria, increasing your haste by 20% for 10 seconds. Thrill Seeker decays rapidly while you're not in combat. Jumping to the final row here. When the haste effect of Euphoria ends, gain 10 seconds, as a tooltip area here, gain 10 seconds of either 20% increased crit chance or versatility, whichever you currently have more of. That's actually pretty strong. It essentially takes your Thrill Seeker ability and gives you 10 seconds of haste, 10 seconds of 20% haste, and then after that, 10 seconds of either 20% crit or 20% verse. 20% verse is insane. That's a lot of versatility, and 20% crit's actually really strong too. Think of this as sort of like a Destro kind of window. I mean, this covers 2/3 of your Infernal. This Destro. This covers basically all of your Rapture window as AF. This would cover all of your Tyrant window as Demo, where there's some weird like stat updating, scaling effects there. Either way, this like amplifies your Thrill Seeker by an insane amount. Like, it's really, really impressive. Out of all the Soulbinds out there, this is the one I think is the coolest and potentially the most impactful, depending on how much you can like cheese Thrill Seeker, like with your 4 stacks of killing an enemy, and how high you can have the actual, I guess, uptime of Thrill Seeker active. The two smaller effects here, health potions and health stones grant you an absorb shield equal to 50% of the amount healed, which is actually pretty strong from a progression standpoint, whether you're in PvE or even in PvP/arenas. And nimble steps here, enemies within 8 yards are slowed by 10%. If you fall below 35% health, enemies within 8 yards are rooted for 4 seconds. This can only occur once every 60 seconds. Actually pretty strong. Probably pretty strong in arenas, even certain PvE based fights, but her final ability is actually really, really strong, really impressive. I really want to mess with this more, praying for Venthyr buffs and things. Theotar, at the same time, his Soothing Shade ability. Your spells and abilities have a chance to call Tubbins and Grubbins to your side for 12 seconds. Parasol in hand, whatever that means. Standing in the shaded area grants you 525 mastery. That's like the umbrella, I guess. Standing under the umbrella, a bunch of mastery. Cool. His final ability. Once per day, you can speak with Theotar and Sinfall to obtain the Mad Duke's Tea, which increases your intellect by 3%, or your haste by 3%, or your critical strike by 3%, or your verse by 3%. For 1 hour. So I don't actually know how this ability works. If it's like a flask you can just drink over and over and over, similar to like I don't know, an unlimited daily use effect, or if you just pop it once a day and it lasts that hour, and that's basically it. But out of all these effects here, the intellect one I feel is probably most likely going to be the most relevant. Just looking at how main stat scales, 3% int versus 3% haste or crit or verse. I'll take the intellect. It sort of reminds me a bit of, I don't know, like Unbound Changeling. Like, they're all solid effects, but you want the triple effects. You want the haste, crit, and verse effect. You want the big intellect part of this actual party favors trait here. Now, if it's controllable and there's no RNG into it, and you can use this permanently throughout the day, this is actually pretty strong. I would assume this probably does not override a flask or anything of the sort either. The effect could be pretty OP, depending where the final tuning of it actually ends. But once again, I think it's something that's important to keep in mind and watch over the course of PTR if Venthyr is buffed or not, because it could potentially be a thing. Other ability here, it's always tea time. Perfect, tea time, boys. When Soothing Shade activates, Tubbins and Grubbins each offer you a cup of tea, healing you for X amount of health every 1 second, about 420, and reducing damage taken by 5% while standing in the shaded area. So it just doubles down, or I guess increases the effectiveness of Soothing Shade, which is nice. A healing effect, a shield, and a pretty good bit of mastery. Life is but an appetizer while you're well fed, gain 60% speed and 60% avoidance. So there's that. Now, unlike Soul Rot with Night Fae, Soothing Shade is an ability to stand that on the ground. It's sort of like Dreamweaver's Field of Blossoms, but with Soul Rot and Nia with Grove Invigoration, you can just cast your Soul Rot and get the stamina increase, get the mastery increase. Soothing Shade is a bit different, so that's important to keep in mind too. But either way, both these final abilities here, party favors and really Fatal Flaw, actually seem really strong. 20 seconds, 10 seconds being 20% crit, and the next 10 being either for haste, then crit, or for... It's insane. It's actually pretty strong, and I'm gonna be honest, I think this is probably one of the strongest traits we've seen out of any Soulbind. This is the final covenant we're reviewing. I definitely would keep an eye on Fatal Flaw, but keep in mind right now that both Impending Catastrophe and, well, Soulbinds for Venthyr are a little at this point. But it's PTR. Anything can change, and we haven't even seen the Warlock legendaries for each covenant yet. Thanks for watching, dudes. I hope this video answered all the questions you guys might have had about just Soulbinds and really the changes, everything you guys have been asking over the last week and a half or so on stream, on YouTube, and basically anywhere else anyone can get a hold of me. I'm really excited about the actual Soulbind changes. The Venthyr one, the Thrillseeker one, actually looks pretty OP, and the Night Fae ones look pretty good too. Bonesmith's actual DPS ability and his final ability, coupled with Marrow Gemstone, also, well, look pretty good. Kyrian, it looks fine, but let's be honest here, Kyrian's sort of bland at this point. So I'm hoping for an overhaul of Kyrian's ability just in the first place. Let me know what you guys think of these new abilities, Soulbinds, whatever what have you, in the comment section below. If you have any questions, also feel free to drop them down there. I'll be sure to get back to you. If you want any weak auras or profiles or add-ons, all are free on my Twitch. If you want to swing by, hang out, ask any questions anytime, feel free to do so. If you guys enjoyed the video and want to see more content, be sure to hit the like button and the subscribe button right down there as well. It helps out tremendously. Thanks again, dudes, and I will catch you all again soon on stream. Peace.